picture this. You're sitting in your living room on a Saturday morning. You've been married for like 40 years.
Right, just a totally normal weekend.
Exactly. You're having your coffee and you're bickering with your spouse about vacuuming the rug. Because, you have a movie date at 12:15 to go see a Spike Lee joint.
Priorities, right.
Yeah. And mixed into this incredibly tedious everyday argument is this debate about whether to loan your adult son $1,000 just to get him through to payday.
Which is such a grounded, real-world stressor.
It really is. It is the most boring, mundane, safe morning imaginable. And then while you're arguing about Carl's Jr. versus Burger King for lunch, you notice the rainwater is creeping out of the front door.
And it's not stopping.
Nope. It just keeps coming.
It just keeps rising, slowly, steadily, until that totally mundane argument about vacuuming transforms into you, breaking through your own ceiling to escape to the roof.
Because your entire life is suddenly going underwater.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Welcome to the world of Frederick Foote. We're so thrilled you're here with us today. Because, if you have ever been sitting at your desk or just walking down your street and suddenly felt this creeping sensation that everyday life is just one incredibly thin, fragile step away from the twilight zone.
Oh, these sources are going to resonate so deeply with you.
They really are. They're going to get right under your skin.
They are deeply unsettling, but in a way that feels intensely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Really unpack Foote's mind-bending, genre-defying short stories, especially if you're a listener who might be newer to contemporary dark fantasy literature.
Right, because Foote is an absolute master at taking these terrifying paranormal elements and weaving them directly into incredibly sharp social commentary.
And he does it without ever making you feel overwhelmed by the magic system, But I do want to set the stage here. He doesn't pull any punches.
Not at all.
Foote uses these stories to touch on some incredibly raw nerves. We're talking systemic racism, unchecked modern capitalism, severe environmental pollution, and generational poverty.
Really heavy, politically charged topics.
Exactly. And just to be completely clear, our role today is entirely impartial. We are not here to endorse the viewpoints or take a side on these real-world issues.
Right, we're just neutrally reporting on the ideas he presents.
Yeah, we want to look at the architecture of his universe. We want to give you a complete picture of the source material and how he uses these societal failures as the literal engine for his horror.
So as for the blueprint of how we're going to tackle this, we'll start by examining how Foote shifts from the mundane to the macabre.
That trapdoor effect.
Exactly. Then we'll look at how societal failures actually invite these ancient supernatural forces in. After that, we'll explore how characters transform from victims to empowered and sometimes deeply cursed agents.
Ooh, the curse part is wild.
It really is. And finally, we'll dig into how he uses environmental decay and these very open-ended resolutions to challenge basically everything we know about traditional storytelling.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think the best place to start is exactly where we began with that hook, the illusion of safety.
Yeah, before we can even touch the broader societal critiques, we really have to look at how he pulls the rug out from under the reader.
Right. He doesn't start you off in a haunted castle with a ghost rattling chains. He starts you in the living room.
He grounds you so thoroughly in the tedious details of life that you don't even realize you're standing on a trapdoor.
Well, let's go back to that story I mentioned in the intro, the one called Rain. Odell and Maude are married for 4 decades, just having a domestic dispute.
And what's so fascinating about that opening is the extreme specificity of the argument. It's not just a generic, oh, we don't have money fight.
Right. Maude's son, Randall, checks at her, asking for exactly $1,000. And Odell pushes back, saying they agreed not to make him dependent on them.
And Maude counters by saying the world is just harder for young black men today.
Yeah, that specificity is crucial. Foote is anchoring us in incredibly relatable financial and generational anxieties.
Because $1,000 is a very deliberate amount. It's not $1 million. It's not a sum that changes your life forever.
No, it's just enough to be a headache.
Exactly. It's exactly the kind of money that can ruin a month, cause a missed rent payment, or just ignite a massive marital fight. It is the pure stress of the working class.
Right. And while this totally normal financial anxiety is playing out, the background is subtly shifting. Foote notes that it's raining outside.
But it's not a dramatic Hollywood thunderstorm, right?
No. There's no crashing lightning or spooky musical cues. Odell specifically observes that the downpour is relentless, unceasing.
There are no lulls, no bursts.
Just a steady, mechanical wall of water.
Which perfectly mirrors the slow, creeping nature of a true disaster. Odell and Maud go to the movie. Odell actually sleeps through half of it. They come home, and the water is rising.
And they still don't panic. The news casually mentions a levee in Elk Grove has broken.
Then the storm drains back up. Another levee breaks.
The mundane reality persists right up until the apocalyptic end. I mean, even as the water pours into their garage, their dialogue remains eerily, almost pathologically domestic.
That's the part that really gets to you.
It gave me absolute chills. They are literally trapped on their roof in the freezing rain. Their house is completely submerged, and Maud says she is freezing.
And what does Odell say?
He says he'll go get a blanket. The psychological denial is so profound.
He's still trying to solve a mundane problem in the middle of the apocalypse.
Yeah, and then Maud delivers this chilling final line. She says they will find them together and adds, "We have all the time in the world, Odell."
Wow. It's just a terrifying portrait of how quickly the mundane is shattered.
It really is.
And Foote executes this exact same trapdoor technique, but with a much more violent paranormal twist in a story called A Perfect Match.
Oh man, this one is wild. We meet this guy, Oliver.
Just a regular guy.
Yeah, he's at a completely normal, kind of gritty club. He's complaining about the dating scene, grumbling that the women there aren't his type.
Very everyday stuff.
Totally. So he steps outside and gets into a completely grounded, realistic altercation. He is jumped by two hardened gangsters named Bonebreaker and Doughboy.
Right, and Oliver is bracing himself for a brutal beatdown, which is a terrible outcome, but one that obeys the laws of physics and reality.
Exactly. No magic yet. He has a busted knee, cracked ribs. He's ready for the end.
But the trapdoor opens when a woman named Fawn, who Oliver affectionately and maybe somewhat patronizingly refers to as Little Bit, intervenes.
And she doesn't do what you'd expect. She doesn't pull a weapon or yell for the police.
No, she simply looks at these violent gangsters and says, "I won't give you my name, but Namby sent me."
And the reaction from Bonebreaker and Doughboy is immediate, visceral terror. These are hardened criminals, but the source text says Easy Money and Doughboy explode out the door.
Bonebreaker looks like he's ready to sprint into oblivion.
Easy Money is actually screaming that Fawn never said she sent her.
Right, the invocation of this terrifying unnamed her.
Yeah, Oliver notes in his internal monologue that he has never met a white person who is aware of her existence, but everyone in his community knows exactly who her refers to.
It implies this hidden mythological undercurrent running parallel to the streets they walk on every day.
And from there, the mundane world is just completely obliterated. Fawn throws the battered Oliver into a car and drives 100 miles an hour to an abandoned warehouse district.
They go inside, and Oliver is placed on this wooden table that feels horrifyingly like a sacrificial altar.
The realism is gone at this point.
Mhm.
It is replaced by a kaleidoscope of the bizarre.
He slips into a state of semi-consciousness, experiencing a healing ritual that frankly borders on the grotesque.
It's super intense. A tall Arab man approaches, slices his own wrist, and commands Oliver to drink his blood.
And then a 7-foot-tall Asian woman literally slices flesh from her own arm and feeds it to him.
Oliver is covered in a foul-smelling paste, urinated on, and then, in the climax of the ritual, someone tosses a lit match onto him.
And he bursts into an inferno.
He genuinely dreams he is being sacrificed. While he is burning, he hears this surround sound, omnipresent voice that tells him she was in Africa when the very first of his kind was born.
And then suddenly he wakes up.
Fire is gone. But more importantly, his busted knee is completely healed. The pain in his ribs is gone.
He has been physically restored by ancient magic.
But the restoration comes with a massive bombshell.
Yeah, Fawn looks at him and casually reveals that they are now mated.
Married. They are bound in an indivisible, unholy union for all eternity, sealed in blood and fire on that warehouse altar.
It's just such a massive whiplash. The guy went to a club, complained about his dating prospects, got into a scuffle over nothing, and ended up eternally bonded as the consort to an ancient witch goddess.
It's exactly like watching a mundane sitcom that, without any commercial break, suddenly turns into a Stephen King novel.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. I mean, for anyone new to dark fantasy, this approach is brilliant because Foote understands the burden of world building.
Oh, for sure. World building can be so heavy.
Exactly. If a writer starts a story with dragons, wizards, and floating castles, they have to do an immense amount of heavy lifting just to convince the reader to suspend their disbelief.
You have to teach the reader the rules of gravity, the politics of the elves, the mechanics of the magic system. It's
It
exhausting.
really is. But Foote completely sidesteps all of that. He doesn't build a new world, he uses ours.
He uses unpaid bills, annoying spouses, and bar fights as the anchors.
Right, so the supernatural isn't a separate, distant realm you have to travel to. It is sitting in the booth next to you at Carl's Jr.
The brand names, the specific streets, the exact amount of money owed, these hold you firmly in reality. So when the magic does hit, you experience the exact same shock as the character.
Precisely.
I want to dig into the psychology of this a bit more, though. I mean, why make the start so deeply boring?
What do you mean?
Well, arguing about vacuuming is about as low stakes as it gets. Does making the start so tedious make the magic seem less believable when it finally hits? Or does it somehow amplify the terror?
Oh, I would argue it profoundly amplifies the terror.
Really? How so?
Because the suddenness of the shift mimics the actual psychological nature of real-life trauma. Think about the worst moments in a person's life.
Okay. Yeah.
A catastrophic car crash, a sudden devastating medical diagnosis, an eviction notice on the door, the sudden loss of a loved one.
None of those have warning signs.
Exactly. These events almost never arrive with a cinematic musical score or a long dramatic buildup. They happen on a random Tuesday while you are thinking about what to make for dinner.
Wow. Yeah, that hits hard. It instantly takes a life and fractures it into a before and an after.
Exactly. Foote is using the abrupt intrusion of the paranormal as a metaphor for how quickly mundane life can be shattered.
That is so true.
The illusion of safety is the greatest trick the modern world plays on us. We think because we have a mortgage and a schedule, we are insulated from chaos.
But Foote's narrative structure is specifically designed to remind us that the floorboards are always rotten, right? And the trapdoor is always there, just under our feet.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the supernatural in Foote's stories mirrors the sudden, devastating arrival of real-life trauma, it naturally raises the question, where does this trauma strike the hardest?
That's the core of his social commentary.
Right, if it's a trapdoor who is standing on the weakest floorboards.
In Foote's universe, the paranormal doesn't strike randomly. It explicitly thrives and takes root in places where human systems, the law, the economy, the broader society have completely failed.
Systemic failure as a literal breeding ground for monsters.
Exactly. We see this incredibly vividly in a story called I'm Back.
Oh, that one is so atmospheric. The narrator is this guy living a comfortable, somewhat detached life in California.
Yeah, he's far removed from his roots.
But he is essentially forced by his family to travel back to the Deep South, to Mississippi, to confirm the death of his deeply abusive 100-year-old Uncle Amos.
And the physical journey he takes mirrors a descent into historical trauma.
It really does. As he drives into Mississippi, Foote's descriptions become heavily loaded.
The narrator feels this political resentment in the air, a nostalgic longing for the Klan.
He literally smells burning flesh on the breeze. He isn't just entering a state, he's entering a landscape defined by generational violence and systemic abandonment.
He's trying to find a specific place called Oculto Maroon, or just the Maroon.
Right, it's this unmapped, off-the-grid settlement of mixed black, white, and native people.
And when he finally arrives, he finds a collection of ramshackle, derelict ghost houses. It is a portrait of extreme, suffocating poverty.
Society has entirely abandoned this place. There are no police, no social workers, no safety nets.
And because the modern world has left a void, something ancient and terrible has moved in to govern the space.
Yeah, he discovers an entity calling itself Seth.
Seth is not a metaphor. He is a literal, immortal evil.
He is occupying the body of a man and brutally, physically, and sexually abusing a couple named Joe and Luna.
And Seth operates with total impunity. He explicitly tells the narrator that he can crush him like a bug.
Why is Seth so confident? Because there is no societal structure to stop him in this abandoned place. Monsters flourish where the state has retreated.
But the narrator doesn't just walk away, right? He realizes the only way to stop an ancient evil is with ancient magic.
He uses the power of naming. He threatens to reveal Seth's true name.
And Foote's details here are so evocative. The true name is kept in a rattlesnake skin sack, guarded by venomous snakes and a blind panther.
The narrator threatens to give this name to Joe and Luna so they can torture Seth for eternity.
It's a massive gamble, but it works. Seth backs down.
But power in Foote's world always demands a toll. The cost of this victory is staggering.
Yeah, the narrator's dead Uncle Amos appears, forcing the narrator to take over his role.
The narrator is struck completely permanently blind. He has to become the new finder to guard this community.
He loses his comfortable California life, his sight, his future, all because he had to step into the void where society failed.
We see a very similar geographical and systemic haunting in the story Abraham.
Oh, that's a brilliant one.
It follows a protagonist named Martin, who's driving his car to his grandmother's land in Western Virginia.
Martin is incredibly self-aware too. He explicitly notes in his internal monologue that this land is isolated, but it is in his family's blood.
And more chillingly, he notes that their blood has literally watered the soil through decades of lynchings and ambushes.
The generational trauma is baked into the dirt itself.
Quite literally, his car mysteriously dies on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere.
And when he steps out to investigate, he experiences this visceral, overwhelming hallucination. Or perhaps he just steps into a supernatural reality.
He wanders into a sick, rotting swamp. He's swarmed by flies. The air smells of decay and corruption.
And out of the muck, he hears the ancient voices of his great-great-grandmother and his ancestors.
And they're demanding that he bring his daughter, Aisha, to them.
They want a blood sacrifice. The voice tells him, "We were here before churches, writing, domesticated animals, every living thing is our kind. Child, would you have us starve?"
The ancestors, the old gods of that isolated land, demand blood to survive.
Martin is horrified. He pushes back, insisting that they aren't savages, that civilized people don't do that.
But the psychological weight of the story hits in the final moments. Martin manages to drive home, he looks at his daughters, and he is struck by the terrifying realization that this dark, ancient pact is fundamentally part of who they are.
Right. To survive in that isolated, blood-soaked environment over the centuries, his ancestors had to make deals with things far older and far hungrier than modern myths.
It's vital to point out that Foote makes sure the reader knows he isn't just making these traumas up in a vacuum.
Exactly. He grounds his fantastical writing with strictly realistic stories sprinkled throughout his collection.
For instance, the outline points us to the stories Adja and Lawrence and Molly. Neither of these have supernatural elements.
Right. In Adja, we follow a police officer desperately trying to negotiate a truce between heavily armed street gangs in a neglected housing project.
Why? Because the system is so broken, it can't even protect a 6-year-old girl or the beloved local doctor who was caught in the crossfire.
And in Lawrence and Molly, Molly goes undercover as a minimum wage night watchman and uncovers rampant systemic wage theft and severe exploitation of immigrant workers.
All perpetrated by a massive security company.
By including those grounded, purely realistic stories, Foote establishes his credentials with the reader. He proves that he deeply understands the mechanics of real-world stakes.
He understands labor exploitation, the cycle of gang violence, and systemic poverty perfectly.
So when he injects a demon or a vampire into those exact same settings in his other stories, we understand it's a deliberate literary device. It's not an author who doesn't understand how the real world operates.
Let me pause and grapple with this for a second, because the causality is really interesting here.
Go for it.
Are these ancient spirits and demons like Seth in the ghost houses, or the hungry ancestors in the Virginia swamp? Are they the actual cause of the systemic trauma in these communities?
Or are they just a symptom?
Yeah. Are they just a parasite feeding off a system that was already broken by human hands?
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look closely at the architecture of the stories, it becomes clear that Foote views the supernatural not as the root cause of inequality.
It's something else.
Yes, it functions as a desperate coping mechanism. It's a physical manifestation of generational trauma.
Ah, I see what you mean.
The poverty, the wage theft, the racism, those all came first. Human beings did that. The state abandoned these marginalized people.
And when society abandons a group, the social contract is completely broken.
Exactly. In the absence of a functioning social contract, police force, or justice system, people are forced to rely on older, darker, and much more dangerous pacts just to survive.
That makes so much sense. The magic is the trauma made physical. It's the only currency they have left to spend.
Exactly. Which brings us to a fascinating pivot point in Foote's narratives.
Where do we go next?
Well, if these communities are trapped between human systemic failure on one side and ancient predatory curses on the other, what happens to the individual human beings caught in the middle?
Right. How do they transform from helpless victims of these systems into empowered agents of change?
And if you think this supernatural intervention is going to be some kind of triumphant Marvel movie rescue, it is exactly the opposite.
It is so gruesome. Let's look at the story, A Dying View.
Such a brutal story.
We are introduced to a man who is so destitute, so sick, and so broken by society that he doesn't even remember his own name.
He's entirely invisible to the world.
He's homeless, wearing rags, smelling of open sewers, and he literally drags himself up a steep hill just to find a nice view to die.
The street gangs he passes ignore him completely because, in the eyes of society, his life has absolute zero value.
He is the ultimate tragic victim of societal neglect. You reach the top of this hill, expecting to pass away quietly.
Instead, he encounters a massive serpent and a giant eagle.
And they both intend to either eat him or patiently watch him die.
But then a goddess intervenes, and her intervention is profoundly strange.
She decides to sacrifice the eagle and the serpent instead of the man.
The animals plead for their lives, and the goddess strikes a bargain. She allows them to give the dying man their unique gifts, giving him 24 hours to return with a suitable sacrifice to take their place.
The power transfer is wild.
The eagle gives him the power of flight.
The serpent gives him retractable, venom-injecting fangs in every finger and toe.
The goddess herself breathes vitality into his lungs. Suddenly, his memory returns. He remembers his name is Confingo.
He is healthy, robust, and armed with lethal, supernatural biological weapons.
He flies back down to the very town that discarded him, and he immediately encounters the brutal straight gangs that terrorize the neighborhood.
And what does he do with this new power? Does he seek restorative justice?
Not at all. He slaughters them.
He gleefully accepts their charge when they try to attack him, and he kills them effortlessly with his toxic touch.
He spends the entire night engaging in bouts of absolute slaughter against the gangsters.
And indulging in sexual excess with the street workers, who are now terrified and deeply impressed by him.
He has gone from a dying, invisible victim to an absolute apex predator in a matter of hours.
But there is always a cost. The invoice always comes due.
The goddess calls him back after his 24 hours are up and demands her sacrifice.
Confingo, absolutely intoxicated and arrogant with his new power, decides he doesn't need to find a proxy.
He slays the eagle and the serpent himself, declaring to the goddess that he is the sacrifice.
He argues he has proven himself deadlier than the viper and quicker than the eagle.
But you don't outsmart a goddess.
Nope. She keeps her promise to give him 100 more years of life, but she withdraws that initial breath of vitality.
She curses him so that his 100 years of immortality will be filled with unending, agonizing pain that grows in intensity every single day.
He gets his power, but he is trapped in an eternal hell of his own making.
It's a grotesque cost for agency. And we see a similar, deeply unsettling physical transformation tied to empowerment in the story, Short Stuff.
Oh, this one's about the kids, right?
Yeah, Tuesday Gibson is a tiny, odd, deeply unpopular schoolgirl. She tells her only friend, Sugar, that she knows all about trolls and monsters.
One day on the playground, a massive 6th-grade bully named Nadine plows into Tuesday, knocks her to the dirt, kicks her, and calls her a stupid hillbilly.
Sugar tries to defend Tuesday and immediately gets punched in the nose for her trouble.
And then Tuesday's supernatural defense mechanism kicks in.
Sugar hears this deep, guttural growl. She looks over and sees that Tiny Tuesday has physically transformed into a terrifying monster.
She has long, thin, spindly arms, razor-sharp claws, and a jaw unhinged with teeth like a great white shark.
The monster wraps its limbs around the bully Nadine and literally bites a massive bloody chunk out of her shoulder.
The monster chews the flesh, swallows it, and giggles.
A split second later, Tuesday is back to looking like a bruised little girl crying in the dirt.
It's a horrific scene, and Foote follows up on it years later.
Sugar sees Tuesday as an adult. Tuesday is now incredibly beautiful, wealthy, walking like the king of the world, effortlessly parting crowds on the sidewalk.
But when a large, aggressive man steps into her path, Sugar feels that exact same ferocious hunger and imperial rage radiate from Tuesday.
The man is inexplicably terrified and stumbles backward.
Sugar looks at Tuesday, remembers the bloody chunk of the bully's shoulder, and realizes she is holding the hand of a monster.
It's a twisted origin story. You don't get a shiny cape and a key to the city.
To beat the monsters that torment you, you have to invite a monster into your own skin.
Exactly. And this theme of monstrous empowerment is applied fascinatingly to gender dynamics and systemic misogyny in the story The Visitor.
Oh, this story has so many layers.
We meet Esther Livingston, an elderly woman in a small conservative Alabama village. She is crippled by severe arthritis and cataracts.
She is walking home from the store in agonizing pain with every single step.
A mysterious, silent stranger, tall, with a thin face, approaches her, gently takes her wagon, and walks her home.
And he heals her. He massages her ruined knees, and the pain completely vanishes.
But the healing quickly turns deeply intimate. The stranger sleeps with her.
When she wakes up the next morning, the stranger is gone, but she is completely cured. She has the flexibility and vitality of a young woman.
But Esther isn't the only one. This stranger, who gives a different name to everyone he meets, visits 6 other marginalized women in the area.
Teenage runaways, spinster school teachers, a stressed, overworked mother of 2.
He heals their physical and emotional ailments, sleeps with them, and then vanishes.
And the aftermath of these visitations is explosive. 2 young local boys are found dead near a swimming hole, cause unknown.
The local sheriff, Amos Dunn, immediately suspects the stranger, but since he can't find him, he focuses his entire harassment campaign on the women.
The sheriff is vile. He calls Esther a Jezebel. He threatens them with jail.
The media descends on the town, sensationalizing the story. The townspeople turn on the women, calling them whores and witches who made deals with the devil.
Someone even firebombs the home of one of the women, Betty Jane.
The entire system, the police force, the community, the church, completely turns against these vulnerable women to punish them for their supernatural encounter.
But the intervention, which results in all 7 women inexplicably becoming pregnant, forces them together.
Esther takes the homeless and displaced women into her own house. They bond deeply.
They form a unified, defiant front against the sheriff and the patriarchal town structure.
Esther realizes she no longer prays to the traditional God, but feels an ecstatic, strange connection to whatever dark force visited them.
And the climax of the story is absolute chaos. Esther goes into labor, and as she gives birth, massive, unexplainable riots and destructive chaos immediately erupt across the county.
Spreading outward like a shockwave, the birth of this new hybrid generation literally tears down the oppressive structures around them.
If we synthesize these 3 stories, Confingo, the flying assassin, Tuesday, the shark-toothed child, and Esther, the matriarch of an apocalyptic brood, a very clear philosophical pattern emerges.
It does. In Foote's universe, human frailty is ruthlessly exploited by systemic failure.
To overcome that frailty, supernatural intervention is required.
But that intervention never, ever restores the victim to normal. It elevates them, yes, but to a state of monstrosity, deep social exile, or apocalyptic disruption.
It suggests a very dark truth about the human condition.
That to survive true, crushing, systemic oppression, one must sometimes embrace the darkest, most terrifying parts of themselves.
You cannot fight an asymmetrical war with clean hands.
That is incredibly heavy. You're right. It's not triumphant. It's a tragedy of necessity.
So we've looked at how this dynamic plays out in a single household, in a neglected Mississippi neighborhood, and inside the bodies of individuals.
But Foote doesn't stop there. He zooms the camera all the way out.
He uses these exact same genre tropes, vampires, spirits, ancient bloodlines, to critique the macro-level decay of our entire planet.
Which brings us to one of Foote's most brilliant subversions of the dark fantasy genre, the horror of environmental decay.
Traditionally, in horror or dark fantasy, humans are frail, and monsters are the apex predators.
Right, they are the existential threat to humanity. We are the prey.
It's Dracula stalking London. It's the Wolfman hunting in the woods.
But Foote looks at the reality of modern human activity, specifically rampant, unchecked capitalism and industrial environmental pollution, and he completely flips the dynamic.
Human negligence has become so vast and so deeply toxic that it is literally wiping out the ancient monsters that are supposed to be terrifying us.
There is a story simply called She, and it illustrates this perfectly.
It follows a colony of female, semi-human, fly-like vampires that live in caves deep under a city park.
They sleep by day and hunt by night. The protagonist remembers ancient times when they would feed on giant humans, laying their eggs in them so the larva could feast on the brain.
Classic, terrifying parasite horror.
But the story takes place in the present day. The protagonist wakes up and goes to the surface to feed.
She targets a human in a subway car. But as she approaches, she can literally smell the toxicity radiating from him.
The text says the humans are full of poisons. The older humans are described as too toxic even to sniff.
She has to abandon the subway and settle for trying to feed on a four-legged animal in a tree.
But while she's hunting, she is violently attacked by a poacher, another vampire from a completely different colony who is starving to death.
The protagonist kills the poacher in self-defense, but she's confused. She knows that there is blood everywhere in the city, billions of humans. How could any vampire be starving?
The devastating answer comes when a spirit of the dead communicates the truth to the entire colony.
The humans have spread their industrial disease to the animals. The poisons from human pollution are now spreading to the vampires themselves through the blood.
causing their ancient bodies to stutter, falter, and fail.
The vampire colonies are literally fighting each other to the death in the caves over the last dwindling, unpolluted food sources.
The protagonist is forced to abandon her destroyed colony to fly north, desperately trying to warn others.
They are starving to death because humanity has polluted its own blood supply so thoroughly that we are literally toxic to consume.
And Foote tackles this even more directly. And with the wild shift in tone in the story, you know how we are.
This story is a structural masterpiece. It starts almost like a comedic, folksy, tall tale.
The narrator, Hector Handy, is sitting at Jack's Bar and Grill. He's known around the bar as a notorious liar and storyteller.
A beautiful, impeccably dressed woman walks in, marches right up to Hector, and immediately threatens his life.
And the bar patrons, instead of helping Hector, basically auction off their spots in line to beat him up, or offer to protect the woman for a fee.
It's genuinely hilarious. The woman reveals she is armed to the teeth with a straight razor, a derringer, and a 9mm pistol.
She drags the protesting, cowardly Hector into the back room of the bar.
Once the door closes and they're in the back room, the comedic tone vanishes completely. It shifts into profound dread.
A woman introduces herself as Vox. She pulls out her phone and shows Hector a poem he wrote a decade ago about vampires.
Hector is a writer, and he has written a successful series of stories called The Black Scrolls, detailing the history of vampires evolving out of Africa over 200,000 years ago.
Vox demands to know why Hector is denigrating her people. Hector is totally bewildered. He says it's fiction. He made it up.
But Vox drops the silence of the grave on him. She uses her obsidian ancient eyes to terrorize his soul, pinning him to the chair with supernatural force.
She reveals she is a literal 200,000-year-old vampire. And she tells Hector that his fictional black scrolls are actually 90% accurate to their true oral history.
The vampires have been spying on him for years, trying to figure out how a human knows their history.
But Vox isn't there to assassinate him. She tells him that his history leaves out the most crucial part.
That 175,000 years ago, the vampires recognized their own destructive nature and pledged to stop their indiscriminate mass killings, which they called butcheries.
They consciously evolved to live alongside humans without being an existential threat.
Hector thinks this is an amazing revelation and immediately offers to help her write it into a new book.
But Vox says time is running out. Even though they live for 400 to 500 years, they are facing imminent genocide.
And the mechanism of this genocide is the absolute crux of Foote's environmental critique.
Vox leans in and tells Hector, "In your blood are plastics that are lethal to us and will someday be deadly to you also. Your plastics are short-circuiting our brain functions."
The microplastics that humans have carelessly saturated the globe with are driving the immortal vampires to extinction.
It's such a modern anxiety mixed with ancient mythology.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I'm struggling with this framing, and I want to debate this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Vox is a 200,000-year-old vampire. Her species spent millennia slaughtering humans, performing literal butcheries.
Right.
But Foote is actually positioning humanity with our plastic grocery bags and cheap consumer products as the greater evil here. Is he seriously asking us to sympathize with an apex predator that feeds on us?
Yes, and that is exactly why it is so brilliant. Foote is making a profound philosophical argument about intent versus scale.
Intent versus scale.
Yeah. He is arguing that intentional evil, like a vampire attack, a demonic possession, or a serial killer, is terrifying on an individual level.
Okay.
But the careless, accidental, profit-driven destruction of the entire planet through plastics and pollution is infinitely more apocalyptic and far-reaching.
Because the vampire only kills its specific prey, but the microplastics destroy the entire ecosystem, the predators, the prey, the water, the soil, everything.
Vox even points this out directly in their debate. Hector tries to defend humanity.
He says, our butcheries were intentional and ours is an accident. We never meant to cause harm. We were just trying to make products cheaper, more affordable, and more available.
To which Vox coldly replies, "Hector, that sounds like greedy indifference."
Foote is using the absolute pinnacle of supernatural predators to highlight how pathetically devastating human capitalism has become.
When the ancient monsters are begging humans to stop polluting because the microplastics in our blood are giving them brain damage, you realize humanity has become the ultimate uncontrollable monster.
It's a staggering critique, and it leaves Hector sitting there at the end of the story, staring down into his glass of scotch, suddenly wondering exactly how much invisible plastic is floating in his drink.
He has no solution. He can't punch microplastics in the face.
Which perfectly sets up the final aspect of Foote's writing we need to explore. the unsettling ambiguity of his open-ended resolutions.
It is a deliberate structural choice. When you are dealing with problems this massive, from deeply entrenched systemic racism in the Deep South to global microplastic pollution driving species to extinction, you can't exactly wrap up a short story with a neat little bow.
Right. If Foote provided a clean, happy ending where the pollution is instantly cleaned up, or the systemic poverty is magically cured by a wizard, it would completely betray the grounded realism that we discussed at the very beginning.
Instead, Foote actively challenges traditional storytelling structures by denying the reader any traditional catharsis.
He refuses to let you off the hook. Let's examine the story, the plan.
It starts right in the middle of the action, in a horrifying post-apocalyptic nightmare.
The narrator is running for his life in the pitch black, slipping on human and animal waste.
He is being hunted by these terrifying white leech-like creatures that drop from the sky and suck the life out of animals and humans in seconds.
The visceral panic of that chase scene is incredibly well written. The leeches fall like rain, their blood is like acid, burning his skin.
He manages to smash open a car window, pop the trunk, and violently shove himself inside, crushing the leeches on his own body in the process.
He falls asleep in the claustrophobic trunk, genuinely hoping for a quick death.
He wakes up hours later to daylight. He pushes the trunk open and discovers that the sunlight has killed the leeches.
They are dry and brittle as fallen leaves. He does a literal happy dance on their carcasses and makes his way toward a safe house surrounded by a barbed wire fence.
He magically remembers the combination to the padlock, opens it, and steps inside.
And then, the narrative violently, inexplicably fractures.
In the very next sentence, without any transition or paragraph break, the narrator is standing in a completely normal, brightly lit coffee shop.
A barista named Cook is handing him $20 in change, realizing he messed up the tip, and running back to the register.
Another customer, Annabelle, is scooping up cash.
The narrator looks around and says, "There's something wrong here. I think we all sense it but can't put our fingers on it, but we have the plan. Thank God for our plan."
And the story just abruptly ends.
We have absolutely no idea what is real. Were the leeches a nightmare he had in the coffee shop?
Or is the coffee shop a comforting hallucination his brain is projecting while he slowly dies in the trunk of the car?
Are these alternate realities bleeding into each other? Foote refuses to answer.
We see a similar, deeply emotional, structural ambiguity in Clovis Clayton Holiday.
It's a whimsical, almost fable-like story about a magical boy named Clovis.
He seems to have one foot in our mundane world and one foot in a magical realm.
He has this unique ability to transfer deep knowledge, empathy, and emotional connection simply by kissing his classmates.
He organizes his fellow elementary students into a collective to ensure no one ever fails a test. He becomes a modern folk hero in his school.
It sounds so sweet, but the supernatural dread is always lurking right on the periphery.
There is a strange, otherworldly girl with a long braid who speaks a language only he understands.
There is a school psychologist who he somehow magically releases from a cycle of repeating her life.
And then there is a cat. A mysterious cat that traps a mouse, crushes it to death, and seemingly winks at Clovis on his very first day of kindergarten.
Fast forward to the first day of 6th grade. The cat is waiting on the school steps.
Clovis suddenly feels like the cornered mouse. His magical, otherworldly spouses are singing in his head that they can't help him today.
He steps into the school building, and the narrative abruptly cuts away to a clinical eyewitness news report.
Clovis, at age 12, has been brutally murdered, his body ravaged.
It is an absolute gut punch of an ending. After his funeral, his young friends are standing around his grave, wondering if he is really gone forever.
One of them says it would be pretty sick if he came back as the cat.
And they turn to look, and the cat is sitting there, staring at them from the top of his headstone. Story over.
Foote just drops the mic and walks away while the feedback is still screaming through the speakers.
He provides zero explanation for who murdered Clovis or why. Was it the supernatural cat? A demon?
Was it just mundane, societal violence rejecting a savior figure?
The profound lack of closure forces the reader to sit in silence with the severe discomfort of a magical, innocent child destroyed by a brutal world.
And finally, let's look at Monday morning.
We met Nat the Finder earlier in our discussion about the Mississippi ghost houses, but this story takes place later in California.
Nat is utterly exhausted by a relentless heat wave. He's accosted on the street by a terrifying woman named Monday, who demands he find her sister.
He goes to his old magical mentors for help, but they are terrified of the name Monday and tell him he is entirely on his own.
Nat travels to Southport, a city defined by high murder rates, crushing poverty, and despair.
He finds Monday's twin sister, Mawu. Mawu drops a bombshell. She tells him Monday is coming to kill them both, and the only way to generate enough magical energy to save themselves is to have sex immediately.
Which is such a wild escalation. He complies, and right as they are finishing, Monday suddenly appears in the room.
Nat is utterly confused and asks how there can be an angel and a demon in the same room.
Mawu playfully splashes him with water and says she was his angel, they are now mates, and it's a marriage made in heaven and consummated in hell.
But she never actually answers his questions about what is happening.
Because it might all be a stress-induced hallucination.
Nat suddenly wakes up, fully clothed, in a bathtub of warm water.
He looks out the window, and the house he was just in looks like it has been completely leveled by a hurricane or a tornado.
His friend Soledad is honking for him outside in his truck, waiting to go to work.
Nat concludes that he isn't sure which of these insane adventures are real or if he just had severe heat stroke.
But he is absolutely not comforted by what he has discovered about being a finder. The story ends with him simply saying, the next thing I'm going to find is a way to not be a finder.
And that desire to quit, to walk away from the narrative entirely, is exactly what Foote is provoking in the reader.
Foote refuses to provide closure because the underlying social issues he is critiquing, endemic poverty, systemic racism, global pollution, do not have easy endings in real life.
You cannot neatly resolve centuries of inequality and trauma in a 15-page short story. To do so would be dishonest.
By leaving the ending fractured, ambiguous, or deeply unsettling, Foote forces the reader to carry the burden of the story into their real life.
You don't get to close the book, take a deep breath, and feel safe. The unsettled feeling lingers. It demands personal reflection.
It creates an active partnership between the author and the reader. Foote builds the diagnostic machine. He shows you the muddy imagery of the societal decay, but he leaves it entirely up to you to interpret the prognosis and decide what to do about it.
It changes how you engage with literature, but more importantly, it changes how you engage with reality.
Absolutely. We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. We started in the relatable domestic lives of everyday people arguing over chores.
We fell through Foote's narrative trapdoors into sudden, terrifying paranormal events.
We examined how the utter failure of human safety nets created a vacuum that malevolent forces eagerly filled.
We watched marginalized victims claim supernatural power at a grotesque physical cost.
We zoomed out to see humans becoming the ultimate toxic hazard to ancient monsters. And we navigated the echoing quiet of his open-ended narratives.
So much to think about.
So what does this all mean? I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Think about the monsters in Foote's stories.
The vampires starving in the caves, the demons occupying bodies in abandoned towns, the ancient gods demanding blood in the swamp.
We usually think of monsters in fiction as representations of our deepest primal fears, the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown.
But based on what we've unpacked today, ask yourself, are Foote's monsters really representing the unknown? Or are they actually manifestations of our own neglected responsibilities as a society?
Are they the broken systems, the ignored poverty, the polluted earth?
The very things we stubbornly refuse to fix, finally taking physical form and coming back to bite us.
That is the true horror of Frederick Foote's universe.
Thank you so much for joining us on the extraordinary mind of Frederick Foote. We hope this exploration has given you the framework you need to dive into his stories yourself and see the hidden mechanics at play. Stay curious, keep questioning the narrative. See you next time.